Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and the other day Canon released some new firmware for the R3, the R5, and the R6, and they basically did it silently. I say they basically did it silently because they didn't tell us about it beforehand, and they didn't make a big deal out of the features that they added, but I do want to make a big deal out of a couple of the features that are now found in the Canon EOS R3. Now, as I've done a lot as of late, I tested out the R3 with the new firmware out at the Philadelphia Phillies game because that's where it gave me an opportunity to use the new mode that allows you to shoot up to 195 frames per second RAW. Yes, 195 frames per second RAW. Now, there are a few caveats that I will get to in just a second, but this is clearly a response to Nikon giving you 120 frames per second JPEG. Now, where's Sony in all of this? They haven't updated the A1 or the A9 to give you the ability to do exactly what Nikon gave you the ability to do. Now, this is why it's great to have multiple camera manufacturers out there pushing the envelope, because if Nikon doesn't come out with 120 frames per second, does Canon come out with 195 frames per second RAW? Now, before I talk about the caveats, I do want to say for anybody that has an R3, it's actually a little hidden to figure out how to activate this mode because it isn't active when you turn the camera on. You have to go to custom settings, you have to hit enable drive mode, and then you have the ability to set between 30 and 195 frames per second. Now, it's in increments. I think the one after one before 195 is 180, but you can select that. Now, here are the caveats. You get 50 shots. So it's 195 frames per second for 50 shots, which equates to 0.26 of a second. That's a quarter of a second. I want to demonstrate what that sounds like to you. All right, this is an R3 with a 400-2.8. This is what it sounds like. You ready? That's it. That was 50 frames at 195 frames per second. It is that fast. Where does that even come into play? What type of subject would you be photographing, and where would this actually be useful? Well, one of the first things I thought about was, why don't I take it out to the Phillies game and try to see if I can get a batter swinging? Now, why do I talk about a batter swinging? Because the other caveats are that you do not have continuous autofocus when you press the shutter button. You have it all the way up to the point where you press the shutter button and then it locks the focus for as long as it's shooting, which in this case it was 0.26 of a second. The other caveat is it turns off metering. So you don't get actual metering, which really doesn't matter because I'm shooting manual metering anyway. My meter and lighting is already locked in. Plus, in a quarter of a second, the light isn't really going to change in this situation. I want to show you the best thing that I was able to get. This is when Schwarber came up to bat. He is the first batter for the Phillies. It's a first pitch fastball. I locked onto him. I nailed it, and he hits a home run. First pitch, fastball, home run, out of here, goodbye, and I got it. Now, it's not exactly easy to make sure that you get the shot when you need it. What I had to do was I had to stand there and with my left eye, look at the pitcher, see when he's going to wind up and throw the pitch, then make sure my composition is basically where it needs to be, and then anticipate. And what I did was I shot, I got the swing, I got the hit, I got the follow through, and that was it. It's that fast. It's basically over before it starts. Kind of like my sex life. So after you shoot those 50 frames, the camera basically locks up and says busy because it's clearing the buffer and writing all of those RAW files to the memory card. Now, we tested it with JPEGs, it was the same 9 seconds. We tested it with RAW files, the same 9 seconds. We tested it to SD cards by itself, same 9 seconds to clear, and the same with the CF Express cards. So you lose the ability to shoot for up to 9 seconds. Now, if you were to shoot less than 50 frames, or if you were to, say you wanted to do 20 or 30 in that quick speed burst, it would write it quicker. But in my opinion, if you have 195, you might as well try and shoot at 195. Now, the RAW files look exactly the same as the RAW files that you would get if you just shot 1 frame a second. The same exact. This is a pretty big deal because you're shooting at 195 frames per second equivalent. Let me jump in here real quick because normally I show you FroPak 3 in action, but I want to show you my favorite preset for editing my Phillies photos, or at least giving me a great starting point. I use Skittles. Look at this, 4 different photos. Skittles, 1 click, beautiful. The next shot, Skittles, 1 click, gets me pretty close. I'm like, but maybe I want to brighten it just a little bit and then pull back on some of the orange, because Skittles gives you a little bit of orange. Oh, and I want to pull back on some of this warmth, and there it is. That looks beautiful, all with a few clicks. Skittles for the next shot, 1 click, beautiful. And the last shot, some Skittles on it, and it looks great. So look, if you want to give yourself a great starting point like I did with Skittles right here and then tweak from there, or you want to speed up your raw workflow, as you know by now, we've created a ton of custom Lightroom presets. You can check out FroPak 3 right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/FroPak3. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters. And if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. Or if you want to get Skittles, which is part of FroPak 1, you can pick up just FroPak 1 or get the triple play bundle with all of our presets from 1, 2, and 3, and you can save even more. Now, let's get back to the video. No, it's not perfect right now, and no, they didn't give you the same ability to shoot at 120 frames per second at a smaller JPEG file like Nikon did with continuous autofocus and metering, and I'm not sure why they didn't put that in there. But if I have the ability to shoot raw and the subject isn't going to be moving towards me, because when they move towards me, they do come out of focus, because I did test that out. Even in that split second of shooting, they are still going to move slightly out of focus because the focus isn't going to follow them. That also shows you how amazing autofocus is, that when in a split second, when the person moves, they're totally out with the 400 2.8. I think the biggest deal here is that this is a harbinger for what's to come in the future for all manufacturers and all systems, where the camera is basically going to be continuously shooting, filling the buffer, and when you press the shutter button, which is what Nikon is already doing with 120 frames per second, it's pre-shooting for a second and it's post-shooting for up to a half a second, I believe. You're going to start to see this happen with more and more cameras, where when you press the shutter button, it's going to take time from before and time after, just in case you were early, just in case you were late. You're going to have those files. Now, I don't believe that's going to take away the job of real photographers. You always hear it. Autofocus is going to make it so easy that everybody can do it. Frames per second is going to make it so easy that everybody could do it. This means you just point and the camera's going to do all the work. Except for the fact you still need to understand your exposure, you still need to understand composition, and you also still need to get access to get the photos that you're gonna get access to. So that is never gonna change. You still will need to know what you're doing as a creative. Now, there's one more feature that Canon added with the R3 firmware update that I wanna talk about, and that's for video 240 frames per second at 1080 with full width readout. That is super slow motion and a nice feature that they've added to the R3. So my biggest question to you guys is, where's 195 frames per second raw useful? Is it useful in science, in sports? Is it something that I'm not even thinking about, where you want to get that split second image and you want to pick out the best of the best with honors? Sir, where is it? So good job, Canon, for doing this. Is Nikon going to do the same thing? Is Sony going to do the same thing? I guess time will tell. Thank you very much for watching. Jared, Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.